Emily Carter thought she was going on a simple date. Jake Harrison was the last person to see her alive. But when her belongings were found scattered in a dark alley and Daniel Hayes, a married businessman, became a prime suspect, the truth behind her disappearance turned into a chilling nightmare. 19-year-old Emily Carter had been looking forward to Friday night for days. It was rare for her to feel truly excited these days, but tonight felt different. 7 months pregnant and navigating life as a soon-to-be single mother, she had recently reconnected with Jake Harrison, an old high school crush who had unexpectedly reached out. It had been years since they had last spoken, but when he messaged her out of the blue, asking to catch up over dinner, she couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. Maybe this was a sign that things were turning around. She left home at exactly 6:30 p.m., dressed in a flowing blue dress that accentuated her baby bump, her long brown hair falling neatly over her shoulders. Her mother, Rachel, watched from the window as she got into a rideshare car. Emily had promised to be home by 10 p.m., knowing how much her mother worried about her being out alone at night. Before she left, she texted her best friend Lisa, letting her know she'd update her once she got home. She didn't expect anything to go wrong, but it was always good to have someone looking out for her. The cafe Jake had chosen was small and tucked away on the outskirts of town. It was the kind of place where couples went for quiet dates, a cozy atmosphere with dim lighting and soft music playing in the background. Security cameras captured Emily walking in at 7:15 p.m., her face lit up with a smile as she spotted Jake sitting in a corner booth. For the next hour, they talked, laughed, and shared plates of food. To anyone watching, it seemed like a normal date, but something was off. Emily barely looked at her phone, something she always did out of habit. It was as if she was avoiding it, or maybe she was being watched. At 9:45 p.m., the footage showed them leaving together. Jake held the door open for her as they stepped outside. The camera caught them exchanging a few words before she got into his car. That was the last confirmed sighting of Emily Carter. By midnight, Rachel knew something was wrong. She had stayed up waiting, checking her phone every few minutes, expecting Emily to walk through the door. When the clock struck 12:30 a.m. with no sign of her daughter, she dialed Emily's number. The call went straight to voicemail. Over the next hour, she called 6 more times, each attempt going unanswered. She tried Lisa, hoping Emily had stopped by her place, but Lisa hadn't heard from her either. The first rays of morning light filtered through the blinds when Rachel finally broke down and called the police. Her voice shook as she explained that her daughter had never come home, that she was 7 months pregnant and would never disappear without saying something. Officers arrived within the hour, asking routine questions. Where had Emily gone? Who had she been with? Had she been having problems with anyone? Rachel answered everything the best she could, but nothing made sense. The police contacted Jake, who answered groggily and claimed he had dropped Emily off near her house around 10 p.m. He said she seemed fine, and he had no idea what could have happened after that. With no immediate evidence of foul play, Emily's case was classified as a missing person investigation. Flyers with her face were printed and circulated throughout town, and officers searched nearby areas. Then, just hours later, a breakthrough came. A man walking his dog through an alleyway 5 blocks from the cafe noticed something unusual on the ground: a small purse. When he picked it up and opened it, he saw an ID card inside. The name read, Emily Carter. The discovery of Emily Carter's purse in a dimly lit alley sent a ripple of urgency through the investigation. It was found 5 blocks from the cafe where she had last been seen, abandoned on the damp pavement. Inside, her wallet remained untouched, with cash and credit cards still in place. Her keys were there too, but one thing was missing: her phone. Nearby, just a few feet away, her shoes had been placed neatly side by side, as if someone had carefully arranged them. The unsettling detail sent a shiver through the officers on the scene. It didn't look like a random crime. It looked deliberate. The police cordoned off the alley, searching for further clues. The area was dimly lit, with only one flickering street lamp casting weak light over the cracked pavement. A few dumpsters lined the back wall of a closed convenience store, but there were no signs of a struggle. No blood, no torn fabric, nothing to indicate a fight. Yet, Emily had been here at some point after she left the cafe. Investigators turned their attention back to Jake, the last known person to see her. He had already told them that he dropped her off near her house around 10 p.m., but something about his story felt off. He insisted Emily had been fine when she got out of the car, yet he hadn't called or messaged her afterward. His behavior wasn't adding up, and his lack of concern raised suspicion. The police obtained security footage from nearby businesses and traffic cameras. After hours of reviewing grainy video clips, they found something chilling. At 11:45 p.m., a black sedan with its hazard lights on had been spotted near the alley where Emily's belongings were found. The car sat idling for almost 10 minutes before finally pulling away. It was the same make and model as Jake's vehicle. Officers brought him in for further questioning. When confronted with the footage, Jake hesitated before responding. He admitted that he had driven past the alley that night, but he claimed it was just a coincidence. He had taken a detour on his way home and hadn't even noticed Emily's purse or shoes. His nervous tone made it clear he wasn't telling the whole truth. A deeper dive into his alibi revealed an even bigger issue. Jake had told police he had been home by 10:30 p.m. However, security footage from a gas station placed him in the area over an hour later. When asked about this inconsistency, he struggled to explain himself, offering vague statements about making a stop and losing track of time. While the police worked to verify his statements, another lead surfaced. A local resident came forward, claiming they had seen a second black car near the alley that night, a different model than Jake's. It was parked with the engine running, but the witness couldn't see who was inside. The timeline suggested that someone else had been watching, waiting in the shadows. With two potential suspects and more questions than answers, investigators knew they were only beginning to uncover the dark truth behind Emily's disappearance. As investigators dug deeper into Emily Carter's life, they uncovered a secret she had kept hidden from almost everyone. The assumption had always been that Jake Harrison might have played a role in her disappearance, but a shocking new revelation shifted the focus elsewhere. Emily had never publicly revealed the identity of her baby's father. Even her closest friends had been left guessing, and whenever the subject came up, she would quickly change it. But while combing through her phone records and online messages, detectives stumbled upon something chilling. A text she had sent to her best friend Lisa a week before she vanished stood out immediately. He found out. I'm scared. If anything happens to me, don't trust him. The vague yet ominous message raised immediate red flags. Who was he? A closer look at Emily's call logs showed frequent communication with a man named Daniel Hayes, a well-known businessman in his late 30s. He was married with 2 children and had no known connection to Emily, at least not publicly. But text messages between them revealed a different story. Their exchanges had started casually, but as months went on, they became more intense, emotional, and increasingly desperate. It became clear that Daniel had been in a relationship with Emily and that she had been pressuring him to take responsibility for their unborn child. Investigators brought Daniel in for questioning. At first, he denied any involvement, insisting he barely knew Emily. But when confronted with the text messages, his demeanor shifted. He admitted they had been involved, but claimed it had ended months ago. He insisted that he had nothing to do with her disappearance and had been home with his wife on the night she went missing. However, surveillance footage from a highway camera proved otherwise. At 11:30 p.m., the night Emily vanished, Daniel's car had been recorded heading toward the same part of town where her purse had been found. It was the second black vehicle spotted near the alley, the one the witness had described. Investigators pressed him further, but Daniel stuck to his story. He claimed he had gone for a late-night drive to clear his head. However, a new piece of evidence would soon dismantle his alibi completely. A motel manager stepped forward, revealing that Daniel had rented a room there just weeks before Emily's disappearance. Security footage showed the two of them arriving separately and entering the room together. This contradicted Daniel's previous claim that their relationship had ended months ago. It also raised an alarming possibility. Had Emily threatened to expose their affair? Then another discovery changed everything. A friend of Emily's, unaware of the ongoing investigation, turned in her laptop to Emily's mother, hoping it might contain personal memories. The police analyzed it and found an email draft never sent. In it, Emily had written a message addressed to Daniel's wife. "You deserve to know the truth. Your husband has been lying to you. He's the father of my child." Emily had been planning to tell the truth, but before she could, she disappeared. A week after Emily Carter's disappearance, the case took a horrifying turn. Early in the morning, a fisherman at Miller's Lake, located 5 miles from town, made a shocking discovery. A partially submerged car was visible near the lake's edge, its dark shape barely distinguishable in the murky water. The authorities were called immediately, and within hours, divers arrived to pull the vehicle out. The car was registered to Daniel Hayes. Investigators had already suspected him of lying about his whereabouts the night Emily vanished, but this discovery confirmed their worst fears. When the trunk was forced open, a terrible scene was revealed. Emily's lifeless body was inside, curled into a fetal position, her arms wrapped protectively around her belly. The baby she had been so eager to meet never had a chance. Despite being submerged in water, Emily's body showed no signs of decomposition that would indicate a full week underwater. This suggested something deeply disturbing. She had not been placed in the lake the night she disappeared. Somewhere, she had been kept for days before being moved. The autopsy report confirmed what investigators feared. Emily had not died from drowning in the lake. Water was found in her lungs, but it wasn't lake water. The presence of chlorine and other chemicals suggested she had been submerged in a controlled environment before being placed in the car. The conclusion was horrifying. Emily had been held somewhere, possibly a private pool or bathtub, and drowned before being transported to the lake. Inside the car, investigators found more unsettling evidence. The driver's seat was pushed far back, further than Daniel would have needed to drive. This suggested someone else had been involved, perhaps an accomplice who had driven the car to its final resting place. The car's interior was strangely clean, except for one small detail: a single strand of hair on the back seat. It was later confirmed to belong to Emily. The investigation now centered on where Emily had been during the missing days before her body was found. Daniel's house was searched, but there was no evidence of her being held there. His phone records, however, revealed a curious pattern. For 3 days after Emily's disappearance, his phone had pinged repeatedly near an abandoned property on the outskirts of town, a vacation home owned by his family. It had been unused for years. A search team was dispatched to the location, a small, secluded cabin with an empty pool in the backyard. What they found was chilling. The pool's floor was still damp, as if it had recently held water. Inside the house, faint impressions of handprints were found on the walls, as if someone had pressed against them while struggling. A single blue dress was found crumpled in the corner, identical to the one Emily had been wearing the night she disappeared. The evidence was undeniable. Emily had been here. She had been alive for days before being silenced forever. The question now was, had Daniel acted alone, or was someone else involved in her tragic fate? With the discovery of the abandoned cabin and the overwhelming evidence inside, investigators turned their full attention to Daniel Hayes. He had denied knowing what happened to Emily, but the facts told a different story. His phone had been near the cabin for 3 consecutive days after her disappearance, and Emily's dress was found inside. The drained pool, with traces of chlorine matching the water in her lungs, suggested this was where she had been drowned. Under mounting pressure, Daniel finally broke. In a cold, emotionless tone, he admitted to being responsible for Emily's death. He claimed that she had threatened to expose their affair and reveal that he was the father of her child. He couldn't allow that to happen. His marriage, career, and reputation were all at stake. In his mind, there was only one solution: to make sure Emily never got the chance to tell the truth. According to Daniel, he had followed Emily on the night of her date with Jake. He had parked near her house, waiting for her to arrive, but when she didn't come home immediately, he drove around looking for her. That was when he saw her walking alone near the alley. He pulled up beside her, convincing her to get into his car, promising that they could talk things through. She hesitated, but ultimately agreed. Instead of taking her home, he drove her to the secluded vacation property telling her they needed privacy to discuss everything. Once inside, Emily realized something was wrong. She tried to leave, but Daniel stopped her. He claimed he didn't intend to kill her at first, only to scare her into keeping quiet. But when she continued to insist that she would tell his wife the truth, his panic took over. He overpowered her, forcing her into the pool and holding her under. She struggled, but in her condition, she couldn't fight back for long. The moment she stopped moving, Daniel knew there was no turning back. He left her body in the house for days, unsure of what to do next. Finally, he decided to stage an accident. He placed her in the trunk of his car, drove to Miller's Lake, and pushed the vehicle into the water, hoping it would never be found. However, what Daniel didn't anticipate was the growing suspicion around him. His inconsistencies, the witness statements, and the discovery of the second black car had all led investigators straight to him. His poorly planned cover-up had fallen apart. Daniel was arrested and charged with Emily's murder. The trial was swift, with overwhelming evidence securing a conviction. He was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole. His wife, devastated by the truth, filed for divorce and moved away with their children, wanting no connection to the man who had destroyed so many lives. Emily's mother, Rachel, was left to grieve not only the loss of her daughter, but also the grandchild she would never get to meet. In the end, Emily's story became a heartbreaking reminder of how secrets, lies, and desperation could lead to unimaginable tragedy.